Welcome to another episode of Wisdom and Knowledge. I am delighted and excited tonight to bring to you wisdom and knowledge. Let me tell you what the segments are that's coming up in the very near future. September the 26th, we will be discussing the topic, Competing for the Mind and Morals of Our Children. Raising God-fearing children, professionally and progressive children, spiritually progressive, professional, competing for the mind and the morals of our children. On the 19th of September, we will be addressing this question: how do Christian men stay spiritually charged while living in a sexually charged society? And then next week, we will be addressing part 2 of what men wish women knew. Now, tonight, we are addressing part number 1 of what men wish women knew. What men, for the past 2 weeks, we have had an excellent panel of women who have been sharing with us and the audience what women wish men knew. They did a fantastic job, all of them. Give them a round of applause. Some of them are listening tonight, and let them know how much we really appreciate their sharing. Tonight and next week is not a rebuttal. This is information that will simply be crystal clear. Now, as we talk tonight about what men wish women knew, we're really talking about in the area of relationships. Well, the first and foremost relationship was husband and wife. God gave Adam and Eve. He fashioned them, put them in the Garden of Eden, and their first human-to-human relationship was husband and wife. There are some fundamental foundational things that we can learn therein that will apply everywhere there are male-female relationships. So though tonight might seem like this is about husbands and wives, it is not limited to that exclusively. So pick up the pristine principle and it will be a blessing to you. We'll share with you and give you plenty of time tonight to ask questions. So I want you to smile, start out smiling, relax your jaw, smile. Type your questions into the Q&A section. If you have a question at any point, we will take time to stop and address it. If you'd like to ask your question verbally, raise your hand in the chat room, and we will give you an opportunity to ask your question verbally. If you choose to be anonymous, if you type in the question, we will not tell who you are. Now, you get a chance to ask verbally while I intentionally provoke dissenting dialogue and divergent discussion. By no means am I seeking agreement from women, nor even from men. I do intend to melt the iceberg of the mutual admiration society and force you to sip slowly from a spring of boiling water. Be careful as we tread lightly and deeply. I welcome all philosophical scrutiny, for I am writing a book that I plan to publish in August of 2022 that will include the very information that I'm going to share with you tonight. So I need to make it airtight. So any even dissenting questions that you may have, do not hesitate to get that to me. Included in that book, we will be making these 2 significant points. 1, husbands do not want their wives to be in subjection, and women do not want their husbands to love them. It's going to be an intriguing book. you don't want to miss it. You want to have a front row seat. And we plan to make it available August of 2022. That gives us a little while to be working on that particular production. Let's get started for tonight. Many men do not know themselves what they want. Many men do not know what they should want. Therefore, they do not know what they wish that women knew. So let me challenge both men and women. First, let me establish the identifying criteria for the man, for the husband, for which I will be speaking tonight. The first thing that I want to tell you, that in a spiritual manner, a man handles life's issues. The difference between a man and a boy: a child is playing with a toy. He can't get the toy to function. He slams it on the ground. He kicks it. He cries. He stomps. He tears up his toy. He kicks it. He's frustrated. But a man has to handle it. A man has to fix it or find out how it operates and make it work. So in a spiritual manner, a man handles life's issues. In a spiritually progressive manner, a man handles life's issues. In a spiritually progressive manner, a man handles life's issues. In a spiritually progressive, masculine manner, a man handles life's issues. In a spiritually progressive, masculine manner, a man handles life's issues. Spiritually progressive is very compatible and complementary with true masculinity. Well, men, they wish that women knew that men's wisdom was worthwhile. This is the central projection that I want to communicate to you tonight. We will spend a little more time developing it, and then we will take your questions so that you can see clearly to the insight of what it is that I'm saying. And if for some reason you need additional information, just hit me up. I'll be more than happy to explain so that you can see how this works in your specific situation, because this concept applies to every person, married, unmarried, male, and female. Our entire society is plagued on this particular point. I could say that the ills of our society revolves around the undergirding principle here. They wish that women knew that men's wisdom was worthwhile. Therefore, they wish that women knew how to want and welcome men's wisdom. Husbands, men wish that women knew how to want men's wisdom and to welcome men's wisdom. There is a great battle, a great war unnecessary right here on the basis of this particular issue. The fundamental point: men wish that women knew how to want and welcome men's wisdom. When that happens, we arrive at this point. When women want and welcome the wisdom of spiritually progressive, masculine mannered men, they will then learn how to celebrate, not just tolerate, the wisdom of the man. Let me say that again. I need to say that about 11 times and then discuss it with you for 20 minutes individually to make sure that you conceptualize the essence of and the validity of this particular point. When women want and welcome the wisdom of spiritually progressive, masculine mannered men, they will then learn to celebrate, not just tolerate, the wisdom of the man. Men wish that women knew how to celebrate them, not just tolerate them. There is a world of difference between celebrating you and tolerating you. When we tolerate you, we endure you, but we wish we didn't have to. When we celebrate you, we are delighted and excited, and we are glad for the occasion. Men wish that women knew how to celebrate them, not just tolerate them. Now, here is an undergirding concept. Here is an undergirding fact that is so crucial for male-female relationships. Sometimes when we attend seminars and forums such as this, we hear from a public perspective. We hear what another man or woman likes. And we then conclude that that is to be the norm. That should be the standard. And if for some reason that is not your preference, you may have a tendency to think that something is wrong with you. Or you hear that men like this or women like this, and then you feel that that's what the person whom I'm in a relationship with prefers. So you start providing that. But that absolutely is not their preference. So the most significant thing is communication. One needs to communicate to the other how to celebrate you. What celebrates you may not be the same thing that celebrates another person. So nothing works outside of wholesome, intense, enduring communication. So do not hesitate to communicate what celebrates you. What is your preferred celebration? There are some food that you enjoy. If a person was preparing a banquet for you and they included the food that you like, you would be happy and you would call it a worthwhile celebration. But if they only had food that you do not like, it would not be much of a celebration for you. I remember in the first grade, the first time I had an opportunity to taste some eggnog, I hated it with a passion. If you had a celebration for me, and if there was eggnog on location, it would significantly dim the celebration. I not only do not want to taste it, I don't even want to see it. So communication is the undergirding experience that will make what I'm talking about tonight work. Men wish women knew how to celebrate them, not just tolerate them. When men, and I'm talking about years ago, when men controlled the purse strings for survival, women tolerated them. Now that women control, or rather many women control their own purse strings, men often are simply just tolerated. But how do men need to be celebrated? How do they need to be that way? Let's consider for a moment. Men need to know that their wisdom is welcomed. It's wanted and welcomed, and it is believed to be worthwhile for the wife. Let me say that about 11 times. That is so crucial. Men need to know that their wisdom is wanted, number one, by the wife. It is welcomed by the wife because she believes it is worthwhile. If your wisdom is not believed to be worthwhile, at best, you will be tolerated, but you will never be celebrated. So men need to know that their wisdom is wanted, it is welcomed, and it is believed to be worthwhile. When you believe that wisdom is welcomed and worthwhile, your receptivity is quite different. It doesn't take much to discover that you are being pushed aside. Have you ever been riding with a person? It became evident they did not know how to reach the destination. Though you may have been sitting in the back seat, you gave them some direction. They passed right on by the street that you told them to turn on. It didn't take long before you realized that your wisdom was not believed to be worthwhile. So men need to know that their wisdom is wanted, it is welcomed, and it is believed to be worthwhile for the wife. Here are some questions. Why would you bring a husband into your relationship if you do not believe that God has given him wisdom? Far too often, relationships are developed, contracted, and proceed on the basis of the physical features that God has provided for the man. But early in that interchange of communication, you need to look for his God-given wisdom. So why would you bring a man into your relationship as a husband if you do not believe that God has given him wisdom? If God has not given him wisdom, anytime you partner up with a man whom God has not given him wisdom, he cannot do anything except take you downward. Why would you bring a husband into your relationship if you do not believe that God has given him wisdom for you? Why would you bring a man into a husband relationship if you do not believe that God has indeed given him some wisdom, and he's given him wisdom for you? Now, I know the question may be, oh, why would God just not give the wisdom to me? Do you realize that God has always given wisdom to one person for another? Do you realize that when Joseph was in Egypt, God gave him the wisdom to give to Pharaoh? Pharaoh's responsibility was to provide food during the famine, but the wisdom came through Joseph. Do you realize that Daniel was given wisdom? Jesus is the wisdom given to the whole world. God could have just deposited all of that wisdom in every person individually, but he chose not to do that. You know that God has given somebody wisdom for you. Now, don't get upset about that. Don't get angry about that. God give wisdom to parents for children. And when parents become elderly and senile, guess what? God gives wisdom to the children for the parents. So why would you bring a husband into your relationship if you do not believe that God has given him wisdom for you? Why would you bring a husband into a relationship if he has not demonstrated some God-given wisdom? See, that's what you should be looking for early on, his God-given wisdom, not whether he's humorous or comical. He knows the latest dance moves. He knows the most inviting restaurant. He knows the most upbeat club. No, you're looking to see, what does he demonstrate about God-given wisdom? And then why would you bring a husband into your relationship? Why would you not want and welcome as worthwhile the God-given wisdom of the husband that you have married? Men need to know that their wisdom is wanted, it is welcome, and it is worthwhile to their wives for themselves. When wisdom is wanted, when it is welcome, when it is perceived to be worthwhile, do not wish to circumvent his wisdom. Do not seek to circumvent. Don't desire to do it, and don't seek to do it. Trust the God-given wisdom that your husband has received. God-given wisdom will cause each husband to desire the sanctification of his wife. Paul writes about that in Ephesians 5, verses 25 through 27. And sanctification has to do with that internal purity of character, so that God-given wisdom will cause each husband to desire the sanctification of his wife. That God-given wisdom will cause each husband to desire the glorification of his wife. That simply means that's the external beauty that grows from the internal purity. You've met people who are just beautiful on the inside, and their beauty on the inside makes them beautiful on the outside. But you know some people who are beautiful, they're gorgeous on the outside, but internally they are ugly, and therefore their glorification is significantly dimmed. Men wish women knew how to develop their capacity to appreciate their sanctification and glorification above all else. When God decided to contrast the husband or to communicate some specific concepts about his glorious bride, the church, he used the husband and wife relationship to do it. And therein he talks about glorification and sanctification. So men wish women knew how to develop their capacity to appreciate those God-given traits. Therefore, women, stop dismissing and blaming men for your inappropriate behavior. Stop dismissing men and blaming them for your inappropriate behavior. Stop saying and you've heard people say this, when men do what they are supposed to do, women will then do what they are supposed to do Don't ever say that again. That simply is not true. Answer this question. When did God ever condition one person's correct behavior contingent upon another person's correct behavior? Never. God has never said, you are exempt from acting right because everybody else is acting wrong. He never, ever did that. So stop looking for perfection while you classify the man's wisdom as inadequate. When we do not wish to accept the authority principle, we work to invalidate the authority person. People work overtime to invalidate God as the creator so that they do not have to accept him as the administrator. People really would not have a problem with God being the creator of the universe, but their problem is they don't want him to be the administrator of the universe. Men wish women knew how to celebrate them, not just tolerate them. I know that I have dropped a heavy ball on you tonight. And so this is the presentation tonight. And so I'm going to stop right here and take questions. No questions are off limits. No questions are too tough. Type your question in the Q&A section or raise your hand, and we will give you an opportunity to ask your question. What question do you have? What question do you have? Don't be shy and bashful. Someone make up a question, because usually after the first question is asked, then people feel comfortable to start asking their questions. So go ahead and ask a question. Someone just go ahead and make up a question. Type a question into the Q&A section, raise your hand, and I will give you an opportunity to ask your question. Someone has typed in a question. Let's see what it is. Do you believe that these points would be brought out in premarital counseling? They absolutely should. They absolutely should. In marital counseling or premarital counseling, we need to go beyond the financial budget and who's going to pay the bills and change the flat tire. We need to go beyond that and look at the spiritual essence of this individual. If you're going to hire a lawyer, you want a Harvard-trained lawyer. You want a lawyer with some criteria. Years ago, when the LASIK surgery was coming on the scene, probably in the middle 90s, I remember going to one of the LASIK procedures. They would let you come and watch that procedure take place. And then afterward, that person would come out and he would talk to you and tell you how much better he could see or she could see immediately. And I remember the advertisings on radio and television. Every LASIK surgeon that I'm aware of would always report how many successful surgeries he had performed. And that gave people some level of confidence. So when we look at demonstrations of wisdom and spiritual traits, it should then be that we conclude that this person has some wisdom that can benefit me, and therefore I will not hesitate to embrace it. So do you believe that these points should be brought out in premarital counseling? Absolutely, they should. All right. Another question asks, how do you know it's God-given wisdom? Well, it depends on, is it something that God has specifically spoken? If it is something that God has specifically spoken, then you can verify that wisdom based upon biblical principle. But if it is about something of which God has not specifically spoken, you may not know that it is God-given wisdom. But guess what? He won't know your wisdom is God-given wisdom. Therefore, it is so important, if you are in a relationship, a marital relationship with a person who you can look back in retrospect and see that they have exercised good wisdom in the past. And if they have done that, you can say, I'm going to take a chance. But if they've not exercised good wisdom in the past, then you know it was not God-given wisdom. You might be very hesitant to proceed with it. But now don't just back up and say, well, I don't know that that's God-given wisdom. At least begin the process to see where it leads. And if it appears that it is taking you in the wrong direction, put it in reverse and back out. Okay. All right. Now we have another question. Praise the Lord. I love questions. The questioner asks, where are the men getting the wisdom from? One, they should be getting it from their father. Two, they should be getting it from other wise men in their family. They should be getting wisdom from men in their environment where they grew up. They should be getting that wisdom from their leaders at church. They should be getting that wisdom from the sermons. And some of this wisdom, they should be getting it from their mother. When you read Proverbs 31, it appears that this wisdom came to a man from his mother. So the person went on to say, many are growing up in broken homes without fathers, and they lack mentors. That is 100% true, and it is so unfortunate. They ask another question. How do we change this dynamic? I understand that wisdom comes from God, but how do men connect this dot? One of the problems we have is that men aren't getting into the Bible. They aren't reading the word. Do you realize that if you took a man who grew up without a father, no man in sight, if he would constantly read, if he would read every day a chapter from Proverbs, a chapter from Psalms, if he would read a chapter a day, every day, the rest of his life, he will have wisdom unbelievable. The wisdom is right in God's book. Men aren't reading. What men are doing is saying, I didn't have a father, didn't have a good image, so I have an excuse. Absolutely not. If you know a man or a boy, if you have a boy in your family that has no man giving him a good example, convince him to read a chapter. There are 150 chapters in Psalms, so 150 days. When he finished that, there are 31 chapters in Proverbs. That's 181 days. So guess what? He will read through both of those twice in a year. If he will do that the rest of his life, he will have wisdom in an abundance. So though there are men who ought to be teaching and training and providing the example, when the example is not there, we have Solomon's example. We have David's example. We have the example of a man who was after God's own heart. Now, I don't dismiss the need for his father image. I don't dismiss that. That will be a deficient if he doesn't have it. But I'm telling you, if you'll convince him to read and meditate on a Psalms once, one Psalm per day, matter of fact, you really could do better than that. You could have him to read one a week and then let him meditate on it. If he will read that Psalm on Sunday and then every day that week, just think about it. It's amazing how wise he will be. We have a person in the chat room that have raised their hand. I believe it is Daryl. Daryl, you are on the air. Please ask your question. Daryl, did you raise your hand on purpose? Unmute yourself if you did. Daryl, or was that by accident that you unmuted yourself? Or that you raised your hand? Well, Daryl, if you'll unmute yourself, I'm unable to unmute you for some reason. So Daryl, when you get, you just unmute yourself, and when you get unmuted, then just start talking, and we will listen to what your question is. All right, we have some more questions. Let me get to. Oh, he said it was an accident. Okay, Daryl, was an accident. Thanks, Daryl. All right. I have a comment. You stepped on my toes, but as a wife, I needed to hear what you said about the spiritual celebration of my husband. I've not been doing that, especially lately. Thank you. That one comment is worth this entire program. That is exactly what it is. I'm trying to get us to reflect. We've got to stop taking the victim role, and we've got to stop making others the victim, and we've got to look into the mirror for ourselves and reflect on, am I doing what I should do? Praise the Lord for an honest woman who is now going to look and begin celebrating her husband. Praise the Lord. I could just hang up right now and go to sleep for the night and have pleasant dreams. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that sharing. There is another response. What can a Christian woman do to encourage her husband to spiritually lead their household with the husband's wisdom? Well, and then the second question is, how does this topic look within a dating relationship? I am inclined to believe that, unfortunately, too many women date on the fleshly level, even Christian women. And in their mind, when we get married, we are then going to go back to our spirituality. That is a dangerous, devastating thing to do. Your spirituality needs to control your dating. So when you are dating, you need to make it clear to any person that you're going to be interacting with on a regular basis. And definitely if it's a dating relationship and you're anticipating it might lead to marriage, you need to lay out on the table what your principles and your values are so that they know that these are my values. So when can a Christian woman do to encourage her husband? It must start before she get married. I have known and have had this conversation with a man who was in the army, he and his wife. Well, he was in the army. He was stationed in Germany. He was married to his first wife. He started dating another woman who was also married. They both got a divorce and married while they were in Germany. He said to me, they were partying, they were night clubbing, they were just having a wild life in Germany. His wife returned to the States, and he returned sometime shortly after she returned. When he returned to the States, his wife had started back going to church. She was involved. And he said to me, it was a shock because he had heard nothing about church and nothing about any spirituality. So when he returned to the States, he had a wife that he did not know. She abandoned all of her spiritual values to connect with him. It was such a shock. He wanted nothing to do with her. And now she wanted nothing to do with him because he wouldn't conform. So the problem was they dated. Well, number one, they shouldn't have been dating. And that's where the problem started. So how does this look within a dating relationship? If you are dating a man and he will not read a verse of scripture and have a conversation and discuss it with you, why would you go out on a second date with him? That is like meeting a man and he won't take a bath. Why would you go out on a second date with him and hold your nose and try not to smell him? Listen, if he doesn't value what you value, now I know what women will say, that there's just no men like that. Yes, there are. But what you're doing is spending too much time with the man that doesn't fit you. And you don't have enough energy when you finally meet the man that does fit you. So you've got to stop doing that. You've got to learn to recognize quickly the person who is compatible with your interests. Now, that's the last question that we have. I think I may have a question that has come in. Someone may have texted me a question here on my cell phone. Let me see if this is a question. Okay, that question has nothing to do with this. Okay, are there any other questions? Are there any other questions? Don't be shy and bashful. I love questions. I love questions. For years, I had a television program called Call and Ask. Came on in 1,600 cities across the nation, and we answered questions because questions get me right to where you want me to be. If I just give some information, I may not be where you want me to be. How do we obtain this recording? Tomorrow by 12 o'clock, you should be able to go on to, if you'll just type in YouTube, Grace View Church of Christ, Anderson, South Carolina. The link to this program will be on our YouTube, and you can view it over and over again. I encourage you to have some discussion groups, bring some people together, play this video for them, and then you guys discuss it. And by all means, give me your feedback, because I'm going to be publishing a book with this information in it in August of next year. And I definitely want to be accurate information that I have shared. All right, give me some other questions. If you have a question, give me another question. If you have a question and you'd like to ask that question directly to me, feel free to do so. Okay, we have a hand up. Okay, I believe this questioner is in Kansas City. Unmute yourself, Miss Donna. For some reason, this doesn't allow me to unmute people. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Okay. Donna, unmute yourself and ask your question. It won't allow me to unmute. If someone knows what I'm doing wrong, please send me a message and let me know. I've noticed recently, I don't know what I'm doing differently. It used to allow me to unmute people. All right. Well, maybe you're going to have to type your question into the Q&A section, and I will read that. Okay. You reference God, wisdom, men are out there. Where are they? Wow, that's a good question. That's a good question. If there are no God-fearing, wise men in none of your circles, you need to change your circles. You don't think that God has allowed the world to become totally void of wise men? If God has, you wouldn't suggest that women have better character than men, that God has, his agenda has become bankrupt and only women are wise and God-fearing. We have to learn how to be able to identify God-fearing men. If there are no God-fearing men in your circle, you need to change your circles. You hang out with me. There are some God-fearing men in the circles at which I hang out in. So if you say, where are they? Wow. And if there are no God-fearing men anywhere, then maybe a group of women should get together and start training some men and investing in them some God-given wisdom. Maybe you need to find a man that has some other good criteria and get him to start reading the Proverbs. And through the Proverbs, he will end up with some God-given wisdom. And then we will be able to solve that issue very promptly. All right, what advice do you have for a woman who decided to sleep with a man and they sleep with a man they are not in a relationship with? Well, if she's sleeping with him, she's in a relationship. She may not want that kind of relationship, but it is a relationship nonetheless. But always remember, the quality of relationship, the ultimate outcome of the quality will have a lot to be determined by how the relationship proceeds. A man preached a sermon one time, and he talked about some city children who went out to the farm. And they were unfamiliar with pigs and the dirtiness of pigs. And so they ended up down there in the pig pen. But the country children understood. And so finally, the parents had to say to the children, if you want to stay out of the pig pen, you got to stay off of the pig path. You cannot travel the pig path and expect not to end up in the pig pen. All right, other questions. Do you have a question? Do you have a question? Well, we are in no hurry. I want to take all questions. Someone said to me, say, you have to turn it into a Zoom room and not the platform you are using. Well, I'm going to call you after this program and find out how to do that, because I really don't know exactly how to do that. Are there any other questions? Remember, next week, we're going to answer part 2, what men wish women knew. If you have a question that you would like to be addressed in part 2, get that question to me, and we will make sure that we do cover that question in part 2. It's been a pleasure tonight sharing with you. I am excited and enthusiastic about the privilege of sharing. Invite 3 or 4 of your good friends to take the journey with us next week. Next week, we will once again look at and discuss what men wish women knew, part 2. Every one of you go onto our YouTube page and subscribe to our channel and view the program and share it with someone you know. Until then, be encouraged.